President Muhammadu Buhari has called on all Progressive Congress members across and outside the country to see the victory of the party in Ekiti State as a good omen for the 2023 general elections and work assiduously to ensure that the party is victorious in continuing the trend with Osun State next month in July. A statement issued by Special Advisor Media and Publicity Femi Adesina, the president congratulated the governor-elect Biodun Oyebanji and the Ekiti people for a peaceful election. The president said the APC is getting stronger and more united. The victory of our party in Ekiti State is an indication of the confidence of Nigerians in the ability of our great party to deliver quality governance to all. The governor-elect of Ekiti State, Biodun Oyebanji, has expressed gratitude to the people of Ekiti State for giving him an opportunity to serve. Oyebanji spoke shortly after being declared the winner of the governorship election, where he won with 187,057 votes. Oyebanji promised to consolidate on the gains made by the party in the last 4 years.
I use this opportunity to once again convey my condolences to the family of our kingsmen who died in the pockets of pre-election violence. I join my voice with that of all well-meaning Ekiti to the call for full investigation into the incidences and ensure justice is done. In the coming days and weeks, our great party and the incumbent Governor Kayode Fayemi administration will be working towards finishing well and strong and completing key legacy projects. We are immensely proud of the legacy our mentor and our leader will be leaving behind, and thank him for his labor of love and sacrifice for the homeland. In the course of time, we will set up a transition committee in accordance with Ekiti State transition law and ensure a seamless transition, and demonstrate our preparedness and clarity of vision with the effectiveness and efficiency with which we will hit the ground running on assumption of office. In the meantime, we will continue our consultation to seek more input into our blueprint for the state, and will, in the coming days, open formal channels through which you can send suggestions to us. We want to continue to listen to you and engage with you, so that as we have promised, together with you, we will keep Ekiti State working. Thank you for listening. God bless Ekiti State. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Well, we have a manifesto that we unveiled in April, and it's clear on our vision and what we want to do for our people. And I'm part of a government that has done so well for Ekiti people. We will continue in that trajectory, and we will also continue the implementation of our manifesto for prosperity for Ekiti people. What our people should look out for is that we are going to create a state that will serve them. This government will be their government. We will take input from them. We will work together with them to ensure that we make our people prosperous. Our intention as a government is to have a very big dent on poverty and make sure that every Ekiti indigene prosper in whatever trade, in whatever thing they are doing as an indigene of these states.
The candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Bisi Kolawole, has congratulated the winner of the election, Biodun Oyebanji of the All Progressive Congress. In a letter to Oyebanji, the PDP candidate said he believes that power belongs to God and he bestows upon whoever he chooses. Kolawole urged the winner to take urgent actions aimed at redressing the plight of people of Ekiti State when he fully assumes office as governor. However, Bisi Kolawole also lamented the incidents of vote buying during the election. Kolawole, while speaking to journalists on Sunday, said there was rampant buying of votes by politicians, which he said was a bad development for Nigeria's democracy. The PDP candidate said although the election was relatively free, the dimension of money politics was a dent on the exercise.
Election has come and gone, and we thank God that we had a relative peace. Excuse me. Despite the fact that we had some problems in Ado-Ekiti and some other places, I think relatively the election can be considered to be peaceful, except for this new craze of vote buying, which is dangerous to our polity. It is very dangerous, it's a very, very dangerous trend. And I hope God will help us. I don't know how we are going to surmount that. It's like we are have substituted that with ballot snatching and all that, and it's a new form of rigging. Vote buying, it's not, you can't get the best from that, but that has come and gone. But I observed that that was what happened in most places. But my local government, in fairness, I think we had it fairly here. It was fair, and at least I won the election in my local government.
All right. For more on Ekiti State governorship election, Arise News correspondent Oyebanji brings us a report.
Although 16 parties presented candidates for the election, the race was largely among three contenders: Abiodun Oyebanji of the ruling All Progressives Congress, Bisi Kolawole of the People's Democratic Party, and Engineer Segun Oni of the Social Democratic Party. The process was scheduled to start at 8:30 a.m., but many electoral officers got to their polling unit as early as 7:15 a.m., ready for the day's business. According to the election management body known as the Independent National Electoral Commission, more than 989,000 voters are registered, but 749,065 actually picked their voters card and were eligible to vote across the 2,445 polling units in the state. In most of these units, the exercise started at 8:30 a.m. with simultaneous accreditation and voting in accordance with the election guidelines. The atmosphere across the state was calm as security agents took positions across the state, maintaining the kind of orderliness that the civic exercise required. Although some soldiers demonstrated limited understanding of the rule guiding movement, the military, police, Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, and others ensured that no one tampered with the peace throughout the process. There were cases of machine failure in the adopted biomodal accreditation system in some centers, but the technology proved to be reliable in many places.
Certain places as well, we discovered that the technology is working well. Technology has been deployed for the purpose of accreditation. It's called BVAS, the biomodal verification of system for voters, and it's working pretty well.
Most politicians adjudged the process as fair compared to previous polls, while some alleged the inducement of voters by others.
I've received reports of vote buying in Ado, and I've received the reports of vote buying in Oye. Those are the adverse reports I've received so far.
Going by my own personal experience at the polling unit, at my polling unit in Ogilolo, Ekiti, it's a pretty smooth exercise. People are calm. They are all queued up to vote. The officers were dutiful, and the beavers worked.
You can see for yourself, the place is calm, everybody is happy, and no chaos, no fighting that we've recorded sometimes in the past.
Oba Adeoye, Arise News, Ado Ekiti.
Right, a lot to talk about Tundu this morning.
Yes, indeed. Congratulations to the governor-elect. His speech there was sort of trying to bring unity and closure to that exercise, although the initial reports are that the Social Democratic Party are having no such thing, and it appears that they might challenge the results. PDP's candidate, Mr. Kolawole, took a more philosophical approach and accepted defeat, but he made the observation that has been widely reported about vote buying, and I think that is most regrettable. Yes, an election was conducted. Yes, we saw improvements. For example, with the BVAS, you'll recall the Abuja area elections back in February, where we had reports of BVAS malfunctioning. That didn't happen this time around. There have been improvements by INEC. Largely a peaceful exercise, but there were pockets of violence. But for me, it has really been marred by vote buying, rampant vote buying, if we're to believe reports that we saw, for example, EFCC arresting people for vote buying. But for me, it has to go way beyond arresting those who were going to buy votes on the day. There needs to be a thorough investigation of where they got all of the money to induce people. And for me, it just goes to show the embarrassing level of poverty that exists in this country. Can you truly say you blame people who perhaps haven't even earned anything in the past few weeks for selling their vote? People are that short-sighted when they are that desperate. And this is just the condition that we find ourselves in. People with, I don't know, decent livelihoods wouldn't even think about it. So it's really just, for me, a tragedy, and it mars this situation for me, the entire victory of the APC candidate, former Secretary to the State Government, Oyebanji. But trying to look on the bright side, he's definitely one that can hit the ground running with that experience of being Secretary to the State Government. I don't see him sort of trying to grope around in the dark and find his feet. He's extremely experienced, and so that much can be said for him, and really has to address this issue of poverty in Ekiti State. President Muhammadu Buhari, of course, is delighted with this result, even though the voter apathy is also glaring. Governor-elect Oyebanji won with 187,000 votes plus. That is abysmal, really. We were told that Ekiti elections reported about 36% voter turnout, which is really poor, considering the massive drive that we've seen of late. Collect your PVCs. You've often observed that PVC collection is one thing, actually going out to vote is another, and this is a perfect illustration. But I think this is good momentum for the ruling party, APC, which I'm sure they hope to carry on in Osun State and carry on in the general election. But something really needs to be done with this voter apathy. Yes, he has his mandate, even if it's 36% voter turnout, or even 6% voter turnout. He got the most votes, and so he has that mandate. But I think we could do a lot better as the Nigerian electorate and really have a more representative process and actually come out and vote our conscience, not vote when we've collected 5,000, 10,000, or whatever the case may be.
Okay, well, I join you in congratulating the winner of the gubernatorial election in Ekiti State, Mr. Biodun Abayomi Oyebanji, popularly known as BAO. And if you look at the figures, I mean, that was a landslide, 187,057 votes. And you know, it was quite impressive, quite an impressive outing in a number of ways. One, it was said this was going to be a three-horse race. It turned out truly to be a three-horse race between the PDP, the SDP that came, second, and then the APC that came first. And this was also supposed to be a litmus test for INEC. INEC itself said, look, it was going to be a test for INEC. And it turned out to have been that, the INEC was able to acquit itself honorably in terms of, service delivery, in terms of the management of the election. This was one major election in which the Electoral Act 2022 would be tested, and a number of indications arising therefrom. And I relied largely on the reports offered by the Campaign for Democracy Development. There was a preliminary report that was signed by Professor Adile Jinodu, who led our team in observing the Ekiti election. And then there was also another report by another observer mission of 300 persons under the auspices of the group known as Yaga Africa. Now, between these two groups, we had very detailed, on-the-ground reporting of what transpired. And the CDD was telling us in its preliminary report that this is an improvement on election management. And what are some of those details in the CDD report? One, that unlike what happened in previous elections in some other places, the INEC officials had arrived in up to about 88% of the locations by 8:30 a.m. and that they were ready to address the voters. Both CDD and Yaga also reported that, one, the process was transparent. And I guess that's as a result of the deployment of beavers, of technology, which also made it possible for people, to be accredited in a rather smooth manner. Where CDD was saying there were problems with the application of the beavers in a number of places, but, the percentage of, error was very low. So according to them, they thought that this was an effective deployment of technology. Then, for the first time in a long while, we don't have this issue of a collation center. Nobody had to carry, a ballot box from one location to the other. Votes were counted and uploaded electronically immediately on the INEC portal. So that, I think, must also have helped transparency. Although CDD, I think, also reported that there was a case of ballot snatching in one or two places where you can't rule that out in Nigeria. Nigerians like to test everything. Now, the other group, Yaga Africa, in one of his paragraphs, also said that, look, their estimate and what was announced as a result, will seem to align. In other words, they really cannot establish any case of, vote manipulation. And that, again, is to the credit of INEC. Now, Yaga Africa also commended in its report the security agencies, particularly the EFCC, that was able to arrest some people who engaged in vote buying, and also the police, who managed to ensure security. However, it was a peaceful election, but, Yaga Africa is saying that those persons who snatch ballot boxes, once they've been identified, those who try to buy votes, they should be subjected to the law, because there are provisions within the law that do not allow you to engage in financial inducement or buy votes. But should anybody be surprised, the delegate process was heavily monetized. So in Ekiti, we saw the APC paying as much as 10,000 naira or 7,000 naira. The PDP also paying up to 5,000 naira, where the SDP, I don't know how much those ones paid.
I hear 3,000 naira.
But in fact, we were told that in some polling units, you could buy a vote for as low as 500 naira. Oh, which is why the PDP spokesperson, was protesting that in that election, poverty was weaponized and that people were being given money by the APC. He didn't talk about his own party being guilty, but he was attacking the APC, trying to take the sting out of the victory of the APC. But the APC spokesperson, Felix Moka, also responded in equal measure. But I think what is more important is that the process has gone well. The promises made by the INEC, the Independent National Electoral Commission, have been made substantially. But even despite the commendation from all the stakeholders involved, I believe that there will still be lessons to be learned from, the Ekiti election. How the beavers can even be more effective than, it has been reported. As for voter turnout, well, about 995,000 persons registered. If you collate all the votes, just a little above 300,000. So INEC says 36.47% turnout. Yaga Africa puts the range between 35.7 and 38.7. Okay, so it's still within the same range of INEC saying officially 36.74. That's still low. And that's why the point remains that people can go and collect the PVC because they may think it will be required for purposes of school admission or for having access to health care or for tax purposes. They may not really, go out there to vote. And as for the youth bulge, those very active young men on social media, if you further disaggregate the numbers in the Ekiti, how many young people came out to vote? Is the usual traditional people, women, who were in the majority of people who came out. So a lot of work still needs to be done with regard to voter mobilization. The candidate of the SDP has done well, of the PDP, by commending and congratulating the winner, BAO. But he is saying one thing, his party spokesperson is saying another thing. But I think they are united on one point, that there were cases of vote buying. How do we address that going forward? And can INEC sustain this performance that has been commended? Not during an off-cycle election, but in a general election. Because an off-cycle, isolated election may be easier to manage when you deploy the resources. But when we have general election, will INEC be able to put up the same level of performance?
I think it has to be said that this is a very bad omen for our country. Because in 2023 elections, if care is not taken, it will be an election of the highest bidder. How much money or dollar do you have? If care is not taken, I foresee a time that vote buying might even start to be in dollars in this country. Maybe they'll start giving them dollar bill. That's what it has become. And no party should come and claim innocence here because all of them bought votes. The difference between the party that won and the party that didn't win is that some had more power with money to buy votes more than the others. So all of them did what they call in local parlance, That was what all of them did. And it's quite sad for me because when you look at it, you should think that democracy should be an exchange of ideas. But the other parties, why will they not weaponize poverty and why would the people not collect money from them? Because what the politicians have done over the years is to impoverish people and weaponize poverty and not develop the educational sector in their state and not do anything. So they weaponize poverty because they can get a certain people to vote for them on election day. But amidst all of that, the politicians are losing the people because increasingly voter apathy is increasing. When you look at the people that elected the last government in Ekiti State, they were far more than the people that elected this government. So year on year, increasingly, the people are looking at politicians and say, these ones are jokers. We'll just collect their money, vote if we can, and move on. The people that truly matter and they're pained, saying, okay, we'll not be a party to this charade. So a lot of people are staying off. And with this, it shows that if care is not taken, 2023 might just be another huge voter apathy scenario again. Because we're fast getting there. Imagine. And it's not only the Ekiti elections. Look at the Anambra elections. The same thing. Okay, some people attribute that to the insecurity. So we have a big problem on our hands, and the politicians must work extra hard. We must truly make people believe in this country all over again. Because increasingly, from the voter numbers, people don't believe in the country.
Are they not served? Are the politicians not served by voter apathy? Don't you think it serves them?
It serves them, but that's the sad reality. I mean, we can't keep saying because it serves a few group of people and the general public that needs to exercise their franchise and bring quality people in will not get the chance.
So they won't do anything about it if it serves them. So, it's the electorate that needs to get out there.
So we need the electorate to get out there. Also, we need the politicians to do well to the electorate so that they even believe in democratic process and governance. Because it's not just a lack of belief in the democratic process. It's also a lack of belief in governance.
But is it about belief in the country or belief in the political class?
Believe in the country. I think the distrust of the political class is beginning to seep into the belief people have in their country. And that's the sad reality. That's where we are getting to.
Well, I hope not.
All right. That's all on News Headline. We take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, we have Michael, we have Adesua, we have Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sport and activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, so it looks like it's going to be a bit of a selling week this week. Shares in Asia Pacific actually fairly mixed. China, bucking really central bank trend of raising rates, left its 1-year and 5-year loan prime rates both unchanged. Alibaba's doing quite well in Hong Kong, it feeling as though the Chinese central bank is sort of moving towards hopes for a potential listing for Ant Financial, which sounds quite good. So basically, everyone's just waiting for the next move, and I suspect it'll probably be downwards as far as China is concerned. Shanghai Composite sat slightly lower this morning. It is worth noting that iron ore, steel, and also coal futures in China have been plummeting as a result of their fears about a global recession. The president of China has been saying that trade with Russia is expected to get to record levels in the coming months. Trade over the first half of this year has been in the tens of billions of US dollars. Countries expect new records coming up. The Chinese leader was speaking on a video conference to what they call the Russian the Russian Davos, which was taking place in St. Petersburg. As far as the US is concerned, yes, looking to the week ahead, big losses, no obvious end in sight to what's going on. I probably don't need to remind you what happened in the markets last week, downwards basically. But unlike recent drawdowns of the Fed, unfortunately, coming up, of course, the usual kind of criticism of not acting quickly enough, is failing to put a bottom on this particular market, and the Finance Secretary, Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary rather, has been saying that inflation is unacceptably high, and everybody is expecting, when Jerome Powell actually talks to lawmakers next week this is, he's going to actually start to be fairly aggressive, or continue to be aggressive as far as the Fed's concerned. So we don't really know the pace of interest rates there. And finally, as far as the United States is concerned, generally speaking, President Joe Biden is going to reverse some of the Trump sanctions that were put on, the Trump tariffs which are put on, and because they according to him don't have any use as we speak at the moment. Details of that to come, no doubt. Apple, some of its employees have voted to unionize. It's the first union for the consumer tech giant in the US. Obviously, a burgeoning labour market is gathering momentum across the country, because the employment situation in the United States is quite tight. These results still have to be verified, but it's quite an important move. As far as Ukraine is concerned, let's turn our attention to that. And they've been saying that they're actually having to turn where they can to get fuel at the moment. Fuel supplies at the moment, they don't have any at all. Belarus being the latest not to send fuel to them, and they're getting fuel, as they're saying, from anywhere they can actually get it. They're expecting further, more intense Russian attacks this week. As far as the European Union is concerned, very, very important political movement in France. President Macron has lost his absolute majority to what's being described as a democratic shock. We're going to see some scurrying around for various alliances with other parties, but basically he was brought to heel by a broad left-wing alliance. Nobody knows how this is going to unfold. He wanted to bring forward reforms, including an increase in the retirement age in France. Whether that will happen, of course, will be borne out with what happens generally as far as the political situation in France progresses over the next few days. Here in the UK, business leaders are bracing themselves for a train strike. It is going to be very serious. What shape will the railways actually emerge from that? I mean, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. This is the biggest walkout in 30 years. And also, we get the inflation numbers in the UK this week, which will add to pressure, no doubt, for employees to go for bigger wage rises. The UK government is going to step up its protection for users of short-term credit, this kind of idea of buy now, pay later, which actually appeals to a number of people. How much is the pandemic actually hitting what people are spending? Is it crimping their discretionary income? We get measurements about that entirely. Possibly it could be around 7% of GDP. The UK City of London leaders, FT City Network, as it's called, they're very worried about the likelihood. They see it as a very strong likelihood of the recession in the UK. But actually, tellingly, they're also worried about the experience of asset managers to actually deal with it, because very few of them will have lived through anything like this before. Oil prices plummeted on Friday. They haven't been going particularly higher over the weekend and into Asian trade this morning. I've got Brent at about 110. That's 25% lower. Brent at 0.25, 0.25% lower at 112, and WTI at 109. And finally, Bitcoin reached 18,000 on Saturday, rallied very, very slightly yesterday, but certainly cryptos are not faring very well as people start to worry about recession. They're thought to be very high risk, and people are turning their attention away from them. So, as I've been saying for a long time, this is not an investment, this is a gamble. Good luck with it. That's the global view.
Let's just go straight to it. The case is this. We know what will happen in France. The new coalition that is second, that got about 31% of the votes in the parliament in France, 557-man parliament, is a group led by a man called Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And we know what Jean-Luc Mélenchon wants. He wants the traditional France, the socialist France, the France of the Gilets Jaunes protesters that went against Macron when he had those big workplace reforms in the first place. The Gilets Jaunes protesters that see everything okay with the fact that the French working code is larger than the Bible, with a lot of laws to favor workers in France, as against the reforms that Macron wants. And it's going to be a fight to finish. How will this affect France, a dominant economy in Europe? Because Macron will not get his way. They'll fight it in the end. His best bet will probably go to the Republicans, but that would have to be tilting him right from his La République en Marche mentality.
I couldn't make any political predictions about France. All I would say is that clearly his intentions to try to reform will get watered down by the shift in democracy that's happened in France. It's as simple as that. You're absolutely right about the rule book as far as working practice is concerned. Nobody works over lunchtime. In fact, it's more or less written down. I'm not sure whether it is or not, but the feeling is it's written down that thou shalt take a 90-minute lunch break, and thou shalt not stay in the working place in which to do it as well. Hence the profusion of brasseries and so on, which started 150 years ago. So that's really what we're facing now. I think Macron tried to do this. But gradually, I'm not sure whether I agree about. I think that France generally is a socialist country, and there's got a lot going for it as far as that's concerned. But certainly, I think there's a rise of popularism as well. Remember that Marine Le Pen could be seeing quite a big, broad base in her power as well. So I think it's slightly more complicated than we looking from the outside possibly imagine. But I think that there will be a lot of very, very anxious political positioning. No question about that. We'll get the results of this in a few days' time, no doubt.
What's your take on the rail strikes? Are you of the same school of thought as the Transport Minister, Grant Shapps, who said that the rail workers are risking striking themselves out of a job? Or do you have sympathy for this strike over pay and reforms?
Well, what we're not seeing is exactly how much some of these people earn. A lot of them actually earn much more than the average income. I'm a little bit surprised by the Labour Party, which is supposed to be a party for workers. Workers need to go to work by definition, and therefore need trains upon which to do that. There's a lot of reform taking place. That's why I don't have an enormous amount of sympathy, but then again, I'm a passenger. I don't actually work for the railways. They will need to reshape themselves. What the shape of them is going to be after all this, I have very, very little idea. But certainly a functioning democracy needs a strong public transport system. So from that point of view, I really do hope that these people actually sit down and get around a negotiating table.
Okay, let's start with the UK. 4,000 rail workers are threatening to walk out this week, beginning from tomorrow, and 2 extra days till Saturday this week. Now, teachers and NHS workers are also threatening to join them. Now, the OECD is revising its growth forecast for the UK. It's saying it will be 0 next year, 2023, by 2023, the worst, among the G20 countries. And meanwhile, what Grant Shapps does is to be blaming other people, either blaming the rail workers or blaming Keir Starmer for not coming out, to condemn the strike. Or the cabinet ministers generally are playing the ostrich and claiming that it's not their duty to negotiate with unions. Whose duty it is, considering the fact that Network Rail is owned by government, or is under the control of government. Meanwhile, economists are saying that in June alone, if these strikes go ahead, the GDP loss for the UK will be about 0.3 to 0.4%. Do you think that that's even an underestimation? And is it right that the government is saying this is not our business? It's Keir Starmer that should keep quiet or condemn? Now, as for France, well, you recall that in the April election, President Macron campaigned on the basis of an economic reform agenda, welfare for pensioners, more wages, business policies, since he says he's an economic liberal. But now that he doesn't have an outright majority, and his own party, the Ensemble, and also the party of the NUPES, the party of what's his name, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, they were almost head-to-head in that election, average of 26%. Now, what is this implication of this for Macron's economic reform agenda, and how are investors responding the morning after?
Well, investors aren't responding yet because they don't know how it's going to turn out. I mean, if I were an investor, I would be enjoying the fact that France has some very large companies, and I wouldn't be too worried about it. But just as far as Macron is concerned, he was the first French president to actually have a second term. So generally speaking, I think what people were actually doing was that they were looking at the other candidates. Now what this is about the MPs. This has nothing to do with the presidential election, and so this is going to be the form of who the lawmakers actually are going to be in France. And I think that his economic reforms, such as they are, and I think that actually raising the rate of retirement is such a basic thing that I suspect that this may well be threatened. Again, we'll have to see how it plays out. It really depends on whether on how the final count actually is, and what kind of deals are done to try to push something through. But I think you're absolutely right. If you're suspecting that everything that he's suggesting will be watered down, yes, it will. That's unfortunately the kind of democracy that France is. As far as the railways are concerned, I think I sort of covered that really. I mean, the fact of it is that you can't have a functioning economy without a public sector or without some sort of public transport system, whoever owns it. They've tried all sorts of different combinations over the years, and basically they've all failed. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we are still creaking along with a Victorian style railway, which is unfortunately constrained by the size of the country. The United States are looking at the UK right now and talking about it being a bit of a basket case. I don't think they're far wrong. I think this is going to be very, very serious indeed. And I have no patience with politicians blaming each other. They can do what they like. The only way to do this is to sit down with the unions and point out some realities about what's going on. And certainly in this, I mean, I look back to the miners' strike. There was a classic example of an industry. However, it was doing fairly badly, but it voted itself completely out of existence by the miners' strike. I would not like that to happen. I firmly believe in public transport, whoever owns it. And I think most people in a working democracy do.
Miners' strike, mid-80s. Well, Britain somehow discontent. We'll see how it plays out. Thank you, Michael Wilson.
Our dependable Rotas Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotas.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. We begin with, well, you heard what Michael Wilson just said a moment ago. You can't have a functioning society or a functioning economy if you don't have a properly run transport system. And we have a transport system that is so dependent on roads that any disruption
needs to hear that.
We're so dependent on roads that any small disruption scatters everything. And right now, as we speak, there are fuel queues. They've come back. Mobility Bank Anthony Way on the way to the airport on the mainland. Here on the island in Victoria Island, the Awolowo, around a number of areas. Why? Well, it's anyone's guess, but I think it's the fuel tankers from NARTO, National Association of Road Tanker Operators, who are saying that possibly the rising cost of diesel is not allowing them to be able to move fuel from the depots to the fuel station. So, and a number of people have been complaining. If you go on Twitter, you'll see a number of folks talking about fuel scarcity in Lagos popping up again. We've had that issue in Abuja as well. So this has to be addressed one way or the other. And because everyone is so dependent on roads and you don't have alternatives, boom, everything is disrupted. Vetiva Capital Management, they released a report called the half year 2022 a rude awakening, talking about a cocktail of factors that have headwinds that have been impacting the global economy and Nigeria. We have a sub-Saharan economist coming on the Global Business Report later today to discuss the report in depth. But there's one section on voter turnouts, which I thought was very interesting that they put that in there, considering the fact that it's election season, not just in Nigeria, but also in Kenya. And the report points out, I think we have a chart where they say that even with increased voter turnout, you have even with increased registration, you have reduced voter turnout. It's a shame we don't have the chart, but anyway, we're trending in the 30% range. If you look at the most recent results in Ekiti, for example, I think it was about 356,000 votes or so, somewhere in that number that were cast. Registration was about 929,000, so 1/3. It's right bang on with their chart where you show that only about 30-something. Yeah, so there it is. So 360,000, total votes as a percentage of about 929. You're looking at a voter turnout of about 36%. I think the general elections in 2019 it was 33%. So how do you improve this? Now, another angle to this is weaponized poverty. We continually talk about how we reduce poverty in this country. We've asked a lot of presidential candidates how they can reduce poverty and what they can do about it. Here's I think it was a headline from the Daily Post. I think even this day also pointed this out as well, that people were selling their votes for 500 naira. But here's the thing. There's the reality about this. We can huff and puff about it, but look at this tweet from a gentleman, I think his name is Neto. He says, for someone who struggles to see 20,000 naira in a month and has near zero access to good public services, receiving 10,000 naira for a quote-unquote, and he does this sarcastically, pointless thumbprint is a decent deal. Then there's some responses to him where a number of people just basically agree with him. Yeah, but how do you make them see the deal will keep them in a perpetual cycle or circle with that 10K? The next person says Maslow's hierarchy of needs will always come into play, which is food, clothing, and shelter. And then Bossville says many people don't know this. The poverty rate in Nigeria is high. And then at the bottom there, very, very decent. There's more than what they got for trader money, if you remember how that worked out. So, I mean, that's something that is a reality that simply has to be addressed as far as the implications of poverty and how it can be weaponized in elections and so on and so forth. And it's far-reaching as far as trying to get your economic growth to bring people out of poverty. It is still a very, very huge deal, and it is going to have an impact on the upcoming general elections because you can use Ekiti as a petri dish, a test case from what's to come. This is an issue that needs to be addressed. Finally, Morocco, they are the Moroccan government has decided to charge tariffs for all online purchases that are made. That is, you are buying anything and bringing it into the country through online means. So initially, there was a cap on the tariffs. If you were spending, I think the cap was 1,250 Moroccan dirhams, which comes out to about $125. It's 10 Moroccan dirhams to $1. As long as you spend below that cap, you wouldn't be charged any tariff. So of course, human beings, we will find ways around things. What they did was to split their purchases up. So you can spend maybe $100 on something, then spend $25 to stay under the cap so you don't have to pay any tariff. So they noticed that, and then they now said, okay, everybody's going to pay. But there's something very interesting. There's a report from Endeavor, a New York firm that put out a study on, I guess they called it the inflection point, Africa's digital economy poised to take off. Morocco is largely unbanked. In 2020, 98% of transactions that were carried out were in cash. According to the World Bank, only about 17% of the population uses digital payments. About, less than 2% carried out transactions online in 2021. So there's a lot, 1.6% of Moroccan shopping online. So yeah, it's quite interesting. There's a lot to be, as far as potential. The telecom infrastructure is not quite there, and I understand that they're very distrustful of buying things online over in Morocco. So there's potential there. Wow.
But it's so funny how any single law, any single regulation, the human mind will find ways around it. In Morocco, in Nigeria, name it. That's just what happens.
Human nature.
But yeah, with regards to weaponizing poverty, it's the same way illiteracy has been weaponized, so that it keeps the same group of people down and continually exploited. It's an absolute tragedy. And it's also the same thinking that we get all across the board. So you have the electorate pointing fingers at the political class, but really, it's the same all across the board. That short-sightedness, that complete inability to even conceive of planting trees that you're not going to sit under the shade, doing things for future generations, it does not enter our minds as a country from the top to the bottom. And this is the problem, but who is going to address it? Nobody is what I'm telling you. Because this system, or any other system in existence, is deliberately created and deliberately sustained because it suits certain people. That's a tragedy.
And that's a sad reality. But you asked a very good question. Who is going to change it? Are Nigerians ready? Sadly, we don't see that. Some people argue that, yes, we see it. There's this huge drop. People are going to get their PVCs. But now we know that it's not just all about getting your PVC. But if you're in doubt about the possibility that a change can truly come to society, let's look at the case of Zambia. A lot of Zambians were tired of the status quo. They were tired of massive debts, indebted to China. They were tired of the economy in Zambia. And they all, young people, the Facebook generation, the social media generation, all rallied round a certain Hichilema. He had been going at it for so many years. But the question a lot of people ask is, Rufa, is Zambia Nigeria? No. Is the political dynamics the same? No.
And Zambia has always been pro-youth, a lot more than we are.
But can we look at that and say, okay, we start to ask the right questions? Some people argue that it's far-reaching because when you look at it, illiteracy and poverty is still weaponized. And like that tweet says, once you give somebody 20,000 naira or 10,000 naira that has not seen that amount in a while for his pointless thumbprints, you might not be able to hedge it. Speaking about fuel queues again, I'm sad we are seeing fuel queues. Do you know that subsidy has destroyed Nigeria so much that last week you took a story, and I want us to dwell on that story because we don't know the impact of that story you took. When the finance minister was saying that we are struggling to pay our debts because of subsidy, do you know that if Nigeria faces a debt default, that they are going to blacklist all of us with all the rating agencies, and no foreign investor will want to touch Nigeria with a long pole? And this is what subsidy has caused. And on top of that, some people still have the temerity to show us fuel queues because some tanker drivers are fighting and the likes. Let's watch it very well in this country.
We have to.
We are sitting on the keg of gunpowder. Now we can't pay our debt because of subsidy. World Bank released a report that the number is increasing, and we are still seeing fuel queues. So what are we subsidizing really?
Okay, let me start with Morocco. Morocco, yes, there's a decree in place on tariffs, but you know, this new policy that has been introduced previously, what the policy said was that if we import anything that is maybe above $125, then you pay. Now they're saying no, it goes across board, whether it's $100 or it's $50. But the truth of the matter is that laws are made to take effect, but I don't think this is going to have any significant effect, even if it is for revenue drive, because as you pointed out, 98% of the population in Morocco engage in cash transactions. They don't believe in digital payment. And digital penetration is just about 1.6%. Okay? So why make a law that is likely to be ineffectual? Whereas the trend in other countries, even in Africa, is that digital payment is being encouraged, to promote financial inclusion. Maybe Morocco will have cause at some point to reverse itself. Now, the issue about fuel queues, well, isn't that foreseeable? We had this crisis before. Government said they were going to solve the problem, and the problem has not disappeared. In fact, the marketers are even saying that diesel is likely to get up to 1,000 naira per liter by the end of the year. At the moment, it's over 800 naira per liter. So if people have to buy diesel at 1,000 naira per liter, this will have a knock-on effect on so many other things. Businesses, particularly small and medium-scale businesses that do not have regular access to electricity, that depend on diesel, what would they do? And for the marketers themselves, if the return on investment does not make sense, of course, you have this kind of situation. There's no magic wand as regards that. Now, as for voter apathy, well, voter apathy, the Vertiva results showed that since 1999 up to 2019, a 10-year survey, that voter registration has been going on.
Yes.
But, voter participation, voter turnout has been going down.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the factors? The average Nigerian doesn't think that his vote counts. And that's why we collect money. He thinks that, look, the politicians will do what they like anyway. So the day the average Nigerian voter realizes that his vote counts and there is meaning to the exercise, then perhaps we'll begin to see an upward trend in terms of voter participation. The second major challenge we're likely to face in 2023 will be security. With all that insecurity in parts of the country, if all that needs to happen is for some unknown gunmen to say, look, in the southeast, nobody should come out, and people will stay at home.
They're already saying it.
The few people that will come out will just go out and try to see what is happening. At the sound of any gunshot, everybody will stay at home. Okay, so this is part of the problem. And of course, in parts of the north, many people will also not want to go out. So there are security challenges. There's also the feeling that our democracy, how many years later, 23 years later, since the return to civilian rule, is still not developing well. Finally, I have a question for you. I saw a story, I think in this day, saying that the banks have increased lending rate to 27.79%, and they are giving the excuse about inflation. And they are also saying the central bank, the Monetary Policy Committee thereof, having raised, the key interest rate, that they have no option whatsoever than to also increase rates.
Right.
So where does that leave the real sector in Nigeria?
So banks in Nigeria, essentially, as far as loans are concerned, most of them use floating rates. They're not fixed, right? So the majority of them are floating, which means that when the monetary policy rate increases, they reprice their loans upwards. And when you think about interest income, which is one of their main revenue drivers, it helps them, in fact, to be able to reprice their loans upwards. And it follows, if you see it in the United States, everywhere else where loans go up. Also, a healthy portion of bank loans in Nigeria are exposed to the oil and gas sector. You can see where oil prices are now. So it profits them to be able to reprice loans upwards and get their income from there. As for what happens to the real sector, Doctor, it's a squeeze. It's a squeeze on the real sector because if cost of borrowing goes up, your profitability margins shrink and things get harder for you.
Rotus, let's stop lying. Does bank really borrow to the real sector in Nigeria
They
before?
do now. They do. Oil and gas sector.
At what rates?
The rates are high. They're double digits. They're high. But look, it's cost of doing business. Banks are reducing their hours now because diesel is so high. It costs money to do business in this country. So you increase your rates.
Oh dear.
Thank you, Rotus.
So sorry.
Thanks, Rotus.
Sorry.
For an update on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeswa Omonwa is here with us. Good morning, Adeswa. Tell me you have good news.
Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Dr. Abati. Well, I wish it was good news, but unfortunately, 2 years after, we are learning to live with the disease COVID-19. Let's look at the latest figures. According to the Johns Hopkins University, even though more than 15 million people have died than they would have in a normal year, according to the WHO, since we had this pandemic, over 1 million Americans have died so far, and that's including 450 children. Here in Nigeria, officials have reported 106 new infections for the 16th and 17th of this month. And that's an increase from the 63 infections reported previously in Nigeria. 106 infections. That's a rise. And for those who have been following, they can see that's an uptick. However, the casualty figures from the virus in Nigeria has remained unchanged for a very, very long time, I must say. The death toll remains at 3,144. Meanwhile, the United States government has donated additional 12 million doses of Pfizer vaccines to Nigeria. Victoria Noland, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, disclosed this during her 2-day visit to Nigeria recently. Well, she said this donation to Nigeria is to ensure that the country is able to vaccinate at least 70% of its population, and that's the target Nigeria hopes to achieve by the end of this year. Perhaps maybe tomorrow we can get you to listen to what Victoria Nolan said during her visit to Nigeria just last week. But the vaccination agency for the country, the NPHCDA, says the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine is now available in all COVID-19 vaccination sites and all approved or designated primary healthcare centers across the country. So if you're 18 years and above and you've not been vaccinated, you have a chance to get a single dose vaccine. Roll up your sleeves, get one dose, and you're done. And except you want to get a booster, which is also available in Nigeria. In its latest data release, the NPHCDA also says that Jigawa, Lagos, and Nasarawa states accounts for 24% of the total 50 million vaccine doses administered in Nigeria. So those three states are topping the charts at the moment. Elsewhere, away from Nigeria to the US, where the country is to begin vaccinating children as young as 6 months after the CDC cleared the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna shots for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Well, President Joe Biden hailed the decision as a monumental step, and he says his administration plans to roll out the vaccines to under 5 age groups as early as this week. Roughly 18 million children will be eligible to take the shots in the U.S. Meanwhile, New York City officials are insisting that the goal is to vaccinate and not terminate, talking about workers who were sacked. And so because of this, it says more than 1,400 workers who failed to comply with the vaccine mandate put in place by Mayor Bill de Blasio and were sacked by his successor, Mayor Eric Adams, have a chance to get their jobs back if they get fully vaccinated. That's some good news. And finally, this morning, the Omicron variant of the coronavirus poses about half the risk of long COVID as the Delta variant. That's according to a new study which has now been published in The Lancet. The King's College London studied 56,000 British adults infected with the Omicron between December last year and March this year. And then they compared it with more than 41,000 people who caught the Delta variant between June and November last year. At the same time, they say even though this poses half the risk, about 5% of people who contracted Omicron still experience symptoms such as brain fog, fatigue, headache, heart problems, and other health issues at least a month after getting infected. The study is considered one of the first large-scale reports about the long-term risks of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. Back to you guys.
Okay, in the U.S., the vaccination for children, toddlers, even infants, as young as 6 months, the approval came through Friday, Saturday. First, it was the FDA. Then, of course, the Center for Disease Control, which approves which vaccines should be used and how, gave its own approval. And now children in the U.S., can get 3 shots of the Pfizer vaccine and also 2 shots of the Moderna vaccine. Now, the Moderna vaccine, it will take you just about 2 months or, to get it. But it takes about 3 months for children to take the full dose of the Pfizer vaccine. So you're likely to see, a stronger uptake with regard to Moderna. However, where the problem lies is that the rate of effectiveness has not yet been determined. Okay, what is established is that children are also affected by the virus in any case. But, after all, about 480 persons out of the 1 million deaths recorded as a result of COVID in the United States were said to be children. So everyone is vulnerable. Where the other challenge is with regard to parents, because ultimately it's parents that will take the decision. And many parents are a bit hesitant about having their children take the vaccine. Now, that's that about that. In New York, you remember that when Bill de Blasio, the mayor then, as he was, when he introduced that vaccine mandate, it resulted in litigation. Many of the New York workers, policemen, nurses and others, they went to court to go and challenge it, that the mayor was wrong. There was one court that first ruled that on religious grounds, people should be given the right, should be allowed the right to choose on the basis of their faith. But another court, an appeal court, overruled that particular position. But what the mayor now, Eric Adams, is saying is that, well, the objective was not to punish people, just to encourage vaccination. And in any case, the percentage of persons within the public work system in New York City who refuse to take the vaccine is very small. About 98%, vaccination rate among those public workers is what, they've been able to achieve. As for Nigeria, well, yes, we thank Ambassador Victoria Nuland and also through her, the United States government. You recall that in January, the U.S. gave us 3.2 million vaccine doses. And the U.S. has been doing this not just in Nigeria, but also in other countries. President Biden having promised that in 2022 alone, the American government would donate 1.1 billion vaccine doses to support the vaccination process. Well, you didn't disclose what was supplied, but I think it's Pfizer, that they brought. And other countries have also donated to us. Spain, Greece, Italy, Japan, India, Slovenia, okay? But we see that in spite of all of this, our vaccination rate is just about 18%, even lower for persons who have taken the 2 doses. So it's good news that now the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be available, the single dose. Maybe that will also encourage many Nigerians to go out there and be part of the mass vaccination campaign that the MPHCDA has since put in place. Because many Nigerians, they may even take the first dose and don't want to bother to take the second dose. They say, well, I've taken 1 dose, nothing will happen to me. So that's why from the beginning I thought we'll focus more on Johnson & Johnson.
All right, it has to be said that we're not out of the woods yet with COVID-19, even if everything looks all clear. People are still getting infected. I mean, somebody told me the case of someone that was infected recently of COVID-19 as recent as last week. Infections are still on in Nigeria. COVID-19 is not over. And how can
people are getting infected?
Yeah, people are getting infected. In this case was as early as last week. And how can we, fight this infection? You need to get vaccinated. I think it's also incumbent on the authorities to even let us know where we are now. Give out periodic data and also give out a proper sort of like incentive drive. Because we don't hear campaigns across media any longer. We don't hear all the big campaigns again. And more targeted, grassroots media. And this is where we need to do sort of like health extension to people. Local healthcare workers and the likes, they must go into those communities. They must announce them. We must even, for villages, we must even get kings to still have their town criers go around town and say we are having a vaccination drive because we need to take this vaccine. So at first we were complaining that we didn't have enough vaccines. Now we've got vaccines. We've got Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We've got other vaccines out there. But the problem is people are not taking them. I don't know the numbers now, but the last time I checked with somebody at UNICEF, the uptake numbers were really very low. In fact, for a place like Lagos, other states started beating Lagos in uptake numbers for COVID-19 vaccine. And that's not good enough. We're not out of the woods yet. So let us renew our drive, have a big drive for people to come take the vaccines, and ensure that at least if we can wrap up to about 30% adoption rate of the COVID-19 vaccine, then we can be a whole lot better because relatively we are never going to be like the West. Let's not deceive ourselves. That has about over 60% uptake value to 70%. We're never going to be like the West. We are not that developed, all right? But the 30% margin, at least let's get closer to that number first. Thank you so much for your time, Adesua.
Thank you, Adesua.